Dear students, welcome to the 29th session, which is on the Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens, prescribed by the Mangalore University for third semester BA Optional English, Paper 3, Victorian Literature. This is Vasanta Ravi Prakash, Associate Professor, Department of English, Purnapratna College, Udupi. This video highlights chapters 45 to 48. Let us now see what we have studied in the previous session. Pickwick's stay in the debtor's prison gives him a clear picture of the prisoner's life. He sees the dark side of the prisoner's life, who leads their life in dark rooms, airless rooms. Pickwick gets a rental room for himself from another man. Jingle is found in a pitiable condition in the prison. Jingle's servant, Job Trotter, also sails in the same boat. Sam deliberately takes loan from his father to get into the prison as a debtor, which is a plan of Sam to be with Mr. Pickwick. Pickwick and Sam witness Pickwick's landlord's death. The landlord's death upsets them terribly. Now, Sam's father, Mr. Weller, his stepmother, and Mr. Stiggins visit Sam at the jail. The best part of it is Sam's stepmother does not know from whom Sam has borrowed the money. Sam's stepmother and Stiggins wish Sam to be humiliated of his imprisonment, but Sam has no regrets for being in the prison. Mr. Pickwick brings Sam to visit Jingle and Job Trotter. Sam finds both in a pitiable state. Jingle literally weeps, and one should wonder whether it is the same Jingle who was a cheat in the beginning. Sam provides them food and drink. Sam explains to Jingle that Pickwick helps them all. Pickwick is saddened by things around him. He vows to remain in his room until things become better. This episode tells us how Pickwick and Sam supported Jingle and Job Trotter to recover from a state of depression. Jingle's health improves. Pickwick literally holds Jingle and lifts him up. Pickwick and his servant shower their unconditional love and help on Jingle and Job Trotter and save them from the state of helplessness. Mr. Weller and Sam show their revenge on the hypocrite Mr. Stiggins. Mr. Weller is unhappy to see Mr. Stiggins drinking. He feels that a religious man should not do this. On the other side, we see an overall change in Mr. Jingle and Job Trotter. Mr. Weller also witnesses Mr. Stiggins and Sam's stepmother drinking together. Mr. Weller is displeased regarding this. The British habit of drinking is seen more frequently, and it is emphasized by Dickens in this episode. Ultimately, we find that Sam considers Mr. Pickwick as his godfather and as his mentor. He finds and he considers Mr. Pickwick as an angel. Mrs. Bardell lives with a son. Dodson and Fogg charges Mrs. Bardell as Pickwick refuses to pay them. Mrs. Bardell is arrested for non-payment. She is sent to the same prison where Pickwick and Sam are confined. Sam feels happy about this as it is good for Pickwick. because to release Mrs. Bardell, Mr. Pickwick has to pay the penalty and he will be released too. Mr. Pecker is sent for by Sam and he visits the prison. Mrs. Bardell declares Pickwick's innocence and mentions that Dodson and Fogg were instigators of the trial. Mr. Pecker tells Pickwick if Pickwick does not pay his debt, Mrs. Bardell will remain in the prison until he pays. In this episode, the real picture of Victorian England is depicted in many places. Men's nature was suitable to deal with the real world, and women were nobler and therefore sullied by world. Entry of Arabella Winkle and her husband Winkle to seek help from Mr. Pickwick tells us that Mr. Winkle has sobered a lot by the experience which he had got in his life. The couple visits Mr. Pickwick to seek forgiveness from their parents. Elopement was considered scandalous and both the families had cut off toes with Arabella and Winkle. On the other side, Bob Sawyer and Ben Allen, the brother of Arabella, are informed about the elopement of Arabella and Winkle. With the help of Pickwick's persuasion, Arabella's aunt, Bob Sawyer, and Ben Allen accept the marriage. Pickwick meets a one-eyed man, a traveling salesman, who tells him a story. We see that comedy returns to the novel after a long time, that is, after Pickwick is set free. After the melancholy of the prison stay, comedy sets in with Bob Sawyer, Ben Allen, and the aunt. Mr. Pickwick tries to escape the advances of the aunt by pretending to be tired. He doesn't want to get into trouble anymore. Mr. Pickwick is reminded of Mrs. Bardell's episode and wishes to flee rather than face another misunderstanding. Now, in this episode, Dickens shows how life changes suddenly. We have seen a drastic change in the behavior of Mrs. Bardell, Mr. Jingle, and Job Trotter. Dickens also presents the hypocrisy of the religious man, Mr. Stiggins. Life takes a U-turn sometimes, and people learn lessons in a hard way. Now we shall discuss the multiple choice questions. Question number 1. The British habit of dash is more often highlighted in these chapters. The answer is drinking beer, traveling, playing cards, none of the above. Let's see the answer. The British habit of drinking beer is more often highlighted in these chapters. We shall go to the second question now. Who continue the villainy? Is it Jingle and Job Trotter, Dodson and Fogg, Sam Weller and Pickwick, or Bob Sawyer and Ben Allen? The answer is Dodson and Fogg continue their villainy in the novel. We shall go to the third question. Who visits Mr. Pickwick in prison? Is it Mr. Warden, or Bob Sawyer, or Ben Allen, or Mr. Perker? Let's see the answer now. Mr. Perker visits Mr. Pickwick in prison. Now the next question is, what was considered scandalous during the Victorian period? Is it gambling, or elopement, or drinking, or none of the above? We should see the answer now. Elopement was considered scandalous during the Victorian period. Let's move on to the last question. What returns to the novel after Mr. Pickwick is set free? Is it comedy, romance, tragedy, or none of the above? We see that comedy returns to the novel after Mr. Pickwick is set free. My dear students, we have come to the end of the session. Thank you.